and the only one in my family to do so. I'm not bigging up myself, but why I went was because I had an itch and I had a passion, and now I've got more degrees than that I really need, but always I've done it because I've got a passion about it. And what I heard you say, you didn't say there amongst any of your reasons that you wanted to earn more money, which I have no doubt you will as a consequence of this retraining, but what you said is about your passion was just sort of oozing through. It was like, in a sense, not to put words in your mouth, you didn't want to be the grandparent with a grandchild saying, I never actually did what I really wanted to do, and that's really inspirational. So I take my hat off. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was definitely never about earning lots of money. It's just about doing something I like doing.
What's your advice to others about getting into an apprenticeship, like being a mechanic, indeed other women as well, getting into the trades?
I would just say don't be scared and go for it, to be honest. If I hesitated even more than I had previously, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. And to have these articles and to be asked to come on here today was bloody crazy, to be honest.
You're a spokesperson now. In fact, we've got a text here. Wallace, JP Motors is my mechanic in Masterton, and I'm just so proud of them for reaching out and helping Danielle get going. There you go.
There you go.
That's awesome.
Danielle, we need to talk more, because I think it's just my tappets, but it might be a big end, and I'm not quite sure which if it's a dangerous knock or one I'm not to worry about. But you
fix it yourself, Chris.
Yeah.
Don't worry, she's got bigger fish to fry. Danielle, thank you for that, and Nawanthi, Chris, kia ora. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks. Yeah, kia ora,
Chris.
kia ora.
Stay locked to RNZ, 6 p.m. announcement and more.
Whakarunga mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E Haere nei, a confirmed case of COVID in the community. Ministers are in a crisis meeting about now. The Prime Minister and the Director General of Health are expected to update the country at about 6 tonight. We'll cross live to that press conference at the Beehive. But health officials have indicated a hard and early response is the best tool to stamp out any potential spread. We know the infected person is in Auckland and there's no obvious link to the border or managed isolation. The advice at the moment is stay at home if you are sick, wear a mask on public transport and stay 2 metres away from people. We'll speak to health experts, modellers and decision makers. Don't forget, you can watch us live on Facebook, Freeview Channel 50 and Sky Channel 83.
Ahi Marie, RNZ News at 5, ko Sarah Thompson, tōko ingoa. The Prime Minister and Director General of Health will provide an update on the community case of COVID-19 in Auckland in about an hour's time. Cabinet ministers met this afternoon to determine how to respond. Here's political reporter Katie Scotcher.
The Ministry of Health says no link has yet been established between the case and the border or managed isolation. Health officials were first notified of the case just after 1 o'clock. Jacinda Ardern and COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins returned to Wellington from Auckland to join Cabinet ministers for a briefing on the latest information at 4:30 this afternoon. Last week, the government warned any response to a community case would be swift and severe, more likely to go straight into level 4 lockdown.
A COVID-19 modelling expert's warning is that New Zealand will need strict lockdown measures if the Auckland community case is the Delta variant. Auckland University professor Sean Hendy says if it's confirmed to be Delta, we'll need to move swiftly back into lockdown.
We know, and anyone who's watching what's happening in Sydney at the moment, that you can't do lockdown light with the Delta variant. You do need a very strict lockdown.
Mr Hendy says there's still a chance officials will find a link to the border, but people should assume the situation is serious anyway. Queues are forming outside supermarkets and testing centres in Auckland. RNZ has been told there are people lining up to get into Meadowbank Mall in the central east of the city, the Westfield Mall at St Luke's and the Countdown Supermarket in Mount Eden. There are also queues forming at Balmoral Testing Centre. Auckland Stefano Waiparera Trust is already seeing a surge in demand for COVID tests. Its chief executive, John Tamahiri, says it's redeploying staff so it can expand testing centres and other services. The Māori social service provider has also arranged for Māori wardens to help with traffic control. Mr Tamahiri says he's concerned about what an outbreak would mean if it's confirmed to be the Delta variant.
We all know Delta is far more contagious. What we're struggling with in some of our communities is massive social disinformation campaigns, but our outreach into our communities is working on vaxxers. And the only way to get through this is to vax. We've got to keep banging that drum.
John Tamahiri says the service is acting now as some people are already panicking. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says no one is taking the Taliban at its word. Taliban militants are asking people to trust them after they secured control of all major Afghan cities. Ms Ardern says what matters is how they treat Afghan citizens, particularly women and girls.
That's been a particular focus for us in our presence in the time that we have been there. Has been, for instance, seeing that women and girls are able to access the basics such as education. And so that will be the focus, particularly for us, from that basic human rights perspective.
It's still unknown if a Hercules aircraft will take off tomorrow to help with international evacuation efforts in Afghanistan. The government has confirmed it will send the aircraft and about 40 Defence Force personnel as early as tomorrow morning. More than 50 New Zealand citizens and at least 200 Afghanis who helped New Zealand's efforts there are expected to be repatriated. The police say staff found the body of a baby among recycling waste at a plant in Onehunga. Officers received a report about the body last night. Detective Inspector Scott Beard says the workers called police and officers have been at the scene since last night. He says they're concerned about the mother.
What we're wanting to do is find the mother. We're really concerned that there could be some medical issues here and where she needs some help and support. So if people out there know who that mother is, or if her family or she is actually watching this, please contact us.
A post-mortem will be done tomorrow. It's 4 minutes past 5. State Highway 1 at Paikakariki, north of Wellington, is now fully open to traffic following this morning's slip. Work to clear the slip and debris from the road has been completed, and the road is now open in both directions. Moving into sport now, Shane Bond says it will be a very different Black Caps side he'll return to as bowling coach. Black Caps coach Gary Stead is banking on Shane Bond's involvement in the IPL to help them in the T20 World Cup in the UAE in October. 5 years ago, the former fast bowler was part of the Black Caps coaching staff, but Bond says the likes of veterans Trent Boult and Tim Southey are very different players now.
Your philosophies change, you sort of soften, I think, as you go through the years, and I've done nearly 11 years now of coaching, so I think when I took over, Bolty was around maybe 50 test wickets. He's nearly got 300 now. They've developed as players, so they're very different in the way that you deal with them.
Shane Bond will head to the UAE next month to resume his role with IPL side Mumbai Indians, with the competition restarting on September 19th. Former All Black Tana Umanga is leaving the Blues to focus on private business interests. Umanga has been an assistant coach under head coach Leon McDonald since 2018 and was the Super Rugby franchise's head coach for 2 years from 2016. He has set up a supplements business. And that's the news.
Chaos at Kabul airport.
An American military transport plane on the runway this morning, mobbed by Afghans.
Afghans left behind.
I can't believe the world abandoned Afghanistan. Our friends are going to get killed. They're going to kill us.
The US unrepentant.
American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves.
It's complicated. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rapa Wednesday. For Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, a period of rain and squally thunderstorms today, then showers, heavy and possibly thundery at times tomorrow. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, generally fine, but rain for a time today and showers tomorrow evening. For Waitomo to Wellington, including Taihape, also Wairarapa, periods of rain or showers with some heavy and possibly thundery falls, easing tomorrow evening. Severe nor'west gales about Wellington and Wairarapa, easing this afternoon. For Nelson, Buller and Westland, also Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha, showers heavy and possibly thundery at times, clearing from the south tomorrow morning or afternoon. A few showers returning to the west coast late tomorrow. For Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, occasional showers, some may be heavy and thundery today. And for the Chatham Islands, showers turning to rain for a time tonight. Possible thunderstorms later tomorrow, northerlies rising to gale tonight, then easing tomorrow. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rapa Wednesday. The time is now 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā, Sarah. Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. COVID is back in the community, so what happens now? Health officials have confirmed a positive case of the virus early this afternoon. It's in Auckland, but so far there is no obvious link between the infected person, the border, or managed isolation facilities. The contact tracing process has swung into action with the person being interviewed about where they've been. Ministers are meeting about now with an update expected soon. But last week, the COVID response minister indicated if a Delta case was discovered in the community, expect a short, sharp lockdown. This afternoon, the Ministry of Health also reiterated a hard and early response is the best tool to stamp out any potential spread. Here's the current public health message. Stay at home if you are sick. Call a doctor or healthline for advice about testing. Social distancing is back. That means you've got to keep 2 metres away from people or wear a mask if that is not possible. Also wear a mask on public transport. Keep scanning your QR codes and wash your hands. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, joins us live from our Parliament office. Craig, what's happening down there right now?
Good evening, Lisa. Well, senior cabinet ministers are in a meeting at the moment. Jacinda Ardern and Chris Hipkins both flew down from Auckland to attend. They were briefed by senior health officials on the most up-to-date information, and they are now in a meeting deciding what the next steps are for the government. We will find out at about 6 o'clock in a media conference what decisions the government has made. Here is the latest information, and some of it has been covered already. But health officials were notified of this case at 1 o'clock. Contact tracing kicked into action. The public were notified at about 2:30. Now, at that stage, no link had been made with the border or with MIQ. It was a mystery case, and we don't know yet either whether or not this person had travelled outside of the Auckland region. Another unknown is the variant involved here. Is it the Delta variant, the most infectious variant? It is almost certain to be the case. It is the dominant strain worldwide at the moment. And to give you an idea of just how prevalent it is, in the past 3 weeks, 79 people have arrived at the border with COVID-19. Every single one of them was the Delta variant. 6 o'clock is the time that we will know more, and we'll be able to update you based on what the Prime Minister and Ashley Bloomfield have to say.
Given the government's previous statements, I mean, is it likely that we're going into lockdown here?
Well, unlike cabinet ministers, we of course don't have the latest information, but I can tell you this: if it is a mystery case, and if the most up-to-date information says still they have no link to the border, they have no link to MIQ, a lockdown is almost inevitable. If not nationwide, then definitely in Auckland. That has been the government's action to date with cases like this. Every time a mystery case has popped up, they have gone into lockdown. Now, in those cases, it has tended to be a level 3 lockdown, but keep in mind the recent comments by Chris Hipkins and indeed the heightened sensitivity looking over at what has been happening in New South Wales. Just last week, Chris Hipkins said that a swift and severe lockdown was likely, that a short, sharp move move to level 4 in that affected area was possible. And also, if that individual has moved outside of Auckland, has actually gone into another region, it could even be larger than Auckland, it could be nationwide. We have not been at level 4 since March, April last year. So a quick reminder on what that means. It is the strictest level. People must stay home apart from essential movement. Travel is limited. All gatherings cancelled. All public venues closed. Schools, universities closed. All businesses closed except for essential services, so things like supermarkets, pharmacies and the like will remain open. That is very drastic action. It's much more serious than what you see, for example, across in New South Wales. And an example of why that drastic action might be needed, we learnt today that at the Jet Park Quarantine Hotel in July, the Delta variant actually managed to jump from one room to another across the hallway through an open door, which was left open for about 3 to 5 seconds. So it shows just how infectious that Delta variant can be and why it must be treated with such caution.
Thanks, Craig. That's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, joining us live from Parliament, and he'll keep us up to date if there are any breaking news announcements. Now, a reminder, we will take you live to Parliament for that announcement from the Prime Minister and the Director-General of Health, Dr Ashley Bloomfield. It is due to get underway at 6 o'clock this evening. It is 12 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. E Haere Akine will talk to the Ombudsman about MIQ complaints, and there are plenty of them. Right now, people are already flocking to supermarkets to stock up, and there have been queues forming outside several of them. Ko taku hoa I nai nei, ko Nick Trowbridge. Our reporter Nick is outside a Mount Eden supermarket. Nick, what's going on down there?
Hi Lisa, yeah, well it is pretty hard to get a car park at the moment at Mount Eden Countdown. The line behind us has dissipated a little bit, but I can assure you before there were about 100 people there. As for the things they were shopping for, well, it's the usual things we've come to expect during a lockdown, really. Plenty of rolls of toilet paper going out the door. That is, though, of course, against the messaging that has come from Countdown historically during these lockdowns. The messages have been, of course, there will be plenty of toilet paper, there are going to be plenty of beers, there's going to be plenty of milk, there's going to be plenty of flour for your baking. So you do not need to rush to the supermarket. As for what Countdown says today, well, they're preparing for an alert level change. That alert level change, of course, hasn't occurred yet, but as you can see behind me, the petitions are already going up there, effectively operating like there is an alert level change already, limiting numbers into the supermarket. The advice, again, even though there isn't an alert level change in place just yet, is to wear a mask already, just for a precaution.
And Nick, on your way down there, what were the roads looking like?
Yeah, well, the roads in Auckland, Lisa, were completely clogged. We took the Hopetoun Street overbridge to get here, and traffic north and south was already completely backlogged. People trying to get out of the city, to get home, maybe to get to a supermarket before the lockdown does kick in. Of course, that's what we're all expecting to happen. And I can show you, actually, I just got this photo from a friend. Now, I don't know, for people at home who can't, people listening rather, who can't see that, this is an Uber ride that someone's booked from Cook Street in the CBD to Onehunga, where they live. $114. $114. So, I mean, Uber, usually an indication of how traffic is spiking. So, certainly...
Nick, sorry to interrupt.
People rushing supermarkets.
So cracking more than $100 there. What would that trip normally cost that person, roundabout?
That trip, I understand, would normally cost them, mid-20s to $30. So over 3 times that amount, and still going up by all accounts.
Thanks, Nick. That is our reporter, Nick Trowbridge, live from Mount Eden. And it's not just Auckland where people are rushing to get supplies. Our reporter, Ben Strang, is outside New World in the Wellington suburb of Thorndon. Ben, tell us what's happening down your way.
Yeah, much the same as what Nick was saying. There's a bit of chaos here at New World Thorndon. We're just across the road from the Ministry of Health offices where Dr Bloomfield spent his days, and just down the road from government, the Beehive, and people have been flocking into New World Thorndon here. There have been big lines out the door, much the same as at the Countdown that Nick's at, where they've been limiting numbers that have been coming through the doors because there've been hundreds upon hundreds of people trying to come in and get their emergency groceries, if you like. People are concerned that I've been talking to about this community case in Auckland and just want to get in their emergency supplies as quickly as possible. A lot of toilet paper coming out the door. I don't know if 2-ply can stop Delta, but obviously people are keen to get that as soon as possible. But yeah, obviously plenty of concern in Wellington. A lot more people also wearing masks, so whether that messaging has gone out or not, people are certainly wearing their masks, making sure that they're taking every precaution at this point to make sure that they're safe from this.
Thanks, Ben. That's Ben Strang, who's outside New World in the Wellington suburb of Thorndon. And we should say that both Countdown and Foodstuffs have said in statements that they've got plenty of supplies. Just shop as per normal. Stay calm. No need to panic. Shop. It is 17 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Chief Ombudsman's been swamped with complaints about managed isolation and quarantine. His office has received more than 700 MIQ and border-related complaints in the last 6 weeks. 67 of those are from people who've missed out on spots in the government-managed facilities. Well, joining me now is the Chief Ombudsman, Judge Peter Bosher. Tēnā koe, Judge Bosher. I mean, are
Kia ora,
people,
Lisa.
an ordinary Kiwis getting a fair deal here?
Lisa, just before I answer that, can I just indicate that from the point of view of lockdown, I just want to give you this assurance on your listeners. We are in the Ombudsman office totally agile now, and just so that I add to people's sense of peace over this, when my staff go home this evening, they'll be all set to work by remote and handle any complaint or any matter that comes their way, no matter where they are. So I just want to indicate that from our point of view, we always anticipated that something might change and we're ready for it. Now, to answer your question, complaints have blossomed. So 700 related to MIQ border since the midpoint of last year. And as you've indicated, 64 complaints over the last 6 weeks. What's the major current issue? People just can't book the spaces they're looking for in facilities, and they feel the system isn't accessible and isn't principled.
So what about compared to other ways to get into MIQ? So I'm assuming you're talking about the booking system where people refresh and hope they're able to obtain a spot. There are other ways to get spots in MIQ, like applying for an exemption, special consideration around medical needs. And if you're a sports team, you can go to a group of ministers and see if they rubber stamp you coming in. So is it possible to compare whether everyone is being judged by the same criteria and being given equal access?
Well, I don't think everyone has the access that they need. Can I give you examples? So can we start off with this fact? There are 6,000 MIQ rooms in the country available every fortnight. But of that number, some are out of action for repair cleaning. In fact, about 2,500 operational rooms as I talk to you. Of that, 350 are routinely put aside for emergency situations, and then there's a further number that are available for the Trans-Tasman bubble. That tells you straight away that the number wanting spaces isn't met by the spaces available. So they must book through the MIQ system. The problem with that? Well, first of all, you must get in the door, so to speak, and that's where people can't do it because of the accessibility. That is, as soon as a spot becomes available at the moment, my staff are being reported by complainants that they're grabbed straight away by either bots operating, scripts operating, or by third parties who have been employed to grab those spots. So the brief answer to your question is they're not available to the average person.
Judge, I just want to make sure I'm hearing your figures and understanding them correctly, because we're routinely told there's about 4,000 spots available on a fortnightly basis. In fact, just before this discussion, I looked on the website for the ministry. So you're saying that actually it's around 2,500 and minus from that number, even more that have been ring-fenced for other things.
Yes, correct. The briefing I had on this were the figures that I've given to you, and so those figures that I've just relayed to you were briefed to me by the ministry itself. So you'll see that the problem's exacerbated by...
Well, are we being misled then, Judge?
No, I can't answer that. I think in reality rooms are being used, upgraded. The rooms might be there, Lisa. Whether they are actually available on any minute of any day is something I don't think one can have the confidence in that one had. There seem to me to be less available. And the reason I raise this is because I'd wondered to my staff why there has been the sharp rise in complaints, and I asked whether it was just related to the difficulty getting into the system. But it's not just that. It's in fact that the spaces actually available can't meet the demand.
So what can you do about this? And is there an obligation to the government, a legal obligation to be fair?
Well, there is. And the reason that I've decided to look long and hard at what I'll do about it is, Lisa, I can't sustain this number of complaints coming in with this amount of tenacity. People are expected to get from me a prompt, principled response. They're coming in such a surge that I can't now deal with them individually. I've got to look systemically at what the issue is. And my question is, and it's one I can't answer, but there's been a lot of media commentary on this, is this MIQ booking system one that was set up at a time under emergency where with further planning and foresight it might have been improved and might have been more user-friendly? That's the issue that I want to fundamentally look at. Is it fit for purpose?
So you've had conversations with MB about this and the Chief Executive. Do you have any undertaking from the Ministry to up their game?
Yes, I think it's understood. Can I give you a specific example, just because sometimes I think that helps? Now, as you know, I don't talk publicly about details of investigations I'm undertaking, but I can, for the public interest, give you a broad idea. Mariners who are overseas are subject to a convention that gives them reasonable right of access to their home country. The problem is that on the international market at the moment, they don't quite know where their boat will be available for disembarkation and when. They can't get in the door to get the space booked to come back because the system doesn't classify them as emergency applicants. I think MB accepts that this lacks the flexibility that it should. So next week I have a meeting with MB, and in relation to the issues I raised at the first meeting, I've asked them to report to me next week on whether there is a way we can deal with the surge of complaints that helps offer a remedy to people who are currently coming to me.
We're almost out of time, Judge, but I think this is a very important point to raise given that we now have a community case of COVID. Your staffers have been doing inspections of MIQ facilities, and disturbingly you have found that some staff are not meeting the PPE requirements. What happened there?
Well, mostly the recommendations that we've made. To be fair, I've found the responsiveness to the recommendations that I've made in facilities has been very good. The criticism we've had is the lack of bubbles operating and at times the inappropriate use of PPE. You're quite right. Mostly, and more so with MIQ facilities, I have to say, than I've found with prisons, there's been very, very good responsiveness. I'm still concerned that some facilities are not being able to offer the recreational well-being for people inside them that I think is so important. In current recommendations we've made, we've really asked them to work long and hard in ensuring that everyone inside, including, by the way, some seamen, like the Indonesians who recently came into a facility and who couldn't speak English, only Indonesian, what was set up for them to be able to communicate? And we found not much.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That is the Chief Ombudsman, Judge Peter Bosher. It is 5:25. Homai o whakaaro. Would love your feedback. Nō reira ānei nā kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Couple of issues there. Lots of complaints about MIQ and a lack of access. And the Chief Ombudsman saying that there's about 2,500 operational MIQ rooms, minus a couple of hundred that are ring-fenced for other things. Not as many as perhaps we've been led to believe. Also, a community case of COVID in Auckland this afternoon. We're awaiting an announcement from the Prime Minister. Should come at about 6 o'clock. We'll cross live to that. Pātui mai, you can text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Those in the market for their first home will need to stump up tens of thousands of extra dollars when lending is tightened to those with low deposits. The Reserve Bank is halving the amount of low deposit lending banks can do. CoreLogic has crunched the numbers to see how hard that will hit first home buyers. Amy Williams reports.
First home buyers in Auckland will soon have to stump up an extra $90,000 for a deposit. Across the country, first home buyers will need to produce a 20% deposit, double what they have to front up with now. CoreLogic senior property economist Calvin Davidson says that's a lot more money to save.
In, say, Auckland and Wellington, you're looking at about $90,000 to go from a 10% deposit to a 20% deposit. So a pretty big amount of money. Obviously, that's going to take a little bit of saving to get there, and that's on top of what you've already had to save. So, that's going to put some pressure on.
The First Home Buyers Club provides advice and information to those entering the property market. Its director, Leslie Harris, says the tightening of low deposit lending is not good news for first home buyers who have also faced rising house prices.
My question is, when are we actually going to come up with something that's actually going to help and not hinder the first home buyer actually get into the property market?
But she says the limited low deposit lending will likely go to first home buyers.
The question then goes, how do banks see this rule? Are they going to make some kind of legislation around, well, that small bit of low deposit lending that they now have, they will reserve for first home buyers?
Even so, Mr Davidson says any tightening of lending will crimp the market. CoreLogic's research shows those in the market for their first homes make up a quarter of buyers and account for most low deposit lending.
This is going to be a pretty significant change. I think just really adds to a lot of other pressures that we're seeing in the housing market that will act to slow it down.
Those searching listings are getting more creative. Leslie Harris says she's seeing more groups banding together to get on the ladder.
We're seeing more different forms of ownership. We're seeing, parents leveraging their properties. We're seeing groups of people going together.
The Reserve Bank is set to deliver a rise in the official cash rate tomorrow, something that has not happened in 7 years, and a move that will see interest rates start to rise.
In news just ahead, we've got a statement from the police saying they're aware there are lengthy queues forming at supermarkets throughout Tamaki Makaurau this afternoon. Police say they'll be increasing their visibility at these locations to provide both workers and the public with reassurance. And they're reiterating advice from partner agencies to remain calm. There is no need for panic buying, the police say. And evening traffic congestion is also building across the region. And police remind motorists to drive to the conditions and to allow plenty of time to reach their destinations safely. Core message there, stay calm. And in breaking news, Transpower has issued a grid emergency notice this evening, warning there is not enough generation to meet demand. The lines company put out the notice at 5 o'clock, which is scheduled to last through until 7:30 p.m, and says there may need to be management of demand. Just to reiterate that, they're saying there could be a requirement for management of demand. The notice comes after Transpower last week issued a similar notice ahead of major power cuts across the country. The Warehouse Group is among several organisations who've been handing out the COVID vaccine at work. They're part of a group trialling the at-work pilot, meaning their workers don't have to go far to get the vaccine. Our reporter Louise Tanous and camera operator Marika Habazi went to see them roll up their sleeves.
For employees from the Warehouse Group, today wasn't their average work day. During their shift, they got their first COVID vaccine at the distribution centre in Whitty. These workers are thrilled.
It's really fun. It's during our work time and you get the chance to be, obviously out of work, and it's convenient. I don't have to go in, out of my own lifestyle and come out and getting vaccinated. but getting it done at work is very convenient. For the Polynesian community, we've got to make sure that they're on the same boat getting that vaccine.
Then I might spread the story for another one to come in, Just make sure, because I'm thinking of myself and my family members and the communities and everyone, make them comfortable and feel good to come and take the vaccine for their protection anyway.
Terry Johnson is the General Manager of Health and Safety, who's been teeing it all up. He explains how the process will work over the next few weeks, with about 90 people scheduled to be vaccinated each day.
At a site like this where we're continuous operation, we just make allowances for that. In our store locations, we are actually bringing people from some stores to other stores, and again, we just plan for it, we just allow for it. And we have got team members who want to come in on their days off, again, for the convenience.
Main Freight, Frontiera and Fisher & Paykel Healthcare have also been selected for the trial. The Warehouse Group is offering vaccinations to everyone that's eligible, but not everyone's keen.
We've got 1,700 slots that we're trying to fill as part of the pilot program. We don't know what the uptake is because we don't know who's vaccinated in other processes. What we know is that we've had really good interest in our program. We're well over 50% at the moment.
Tashika Kumar is one of the employees taking up the chance to get her shot.
Bit nervous, but I know I'll be okay.
She says the booking process was straightforward and will save her time.
I saw an email come through to get it done here at workplace, which I thought was quite easy, so that I don't have to wait in line at the clinics. So I booked it online, and it was for today with my friend, so that I don't feel nervous. She's there with me, but unfortunately it was the only time that we had.
It's a process of a temperature check, a quick wait, confirming her details.
What's your name and what time were you meant to have your vaccination?
So this is just the number one of 2 doses that you're going to have to receive of the COVID vaccine.
And then at last, the vaccine.
And that's that.
By the end, she's thrilled.
Pretty fast. Not painful. Yeah, easy.
Good on you for doing the right.
Glad to get it done.
I'm really glad I got it done.
I hope your arm's okay.
Especially at work.
She's booked in for her second jab in 3 weeks and hopes she'll be one step closer to seeing her mum overseas. At other warehouse locations in Hamilton, Wellington and Christchurch, it's the same drill, with vaccinations taking place at distribution centres or stores. They're ramping up their communication to staff, with hopes that the first few days will set an example for other workers to follow suit.
Kia ora e te iwi e haere ake nei e a checkpoint. We'll take you live to Parliament, where the Prime Minister and the Director General of Health will be speaking regarding this new community case in Auckland. Plus, we're live in the city where people have already flocked to supermarkets and testing stations. Homai o whakaaro, I'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines with Sarah.
Kia ora, Lisa. Ahiahi Māori RNZ headlines, ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and Health Chief Ashley Bloomfield will give a briefing in half an hour about the community case of COVID-19 that has been detected in Auckland. It's not yet known whether it's the highly transmissible Delta variety. It's believed the infected person has no links to the border or MIQ facilities. Microbiologist Susie Wiles says Auckland residents should prepare for a snap lockdown. She says the case is likely to be Delta. Dr. Wiles says the government has made it clear that it will act quickly to control any outbreak. And the Auckland Mayor Phil Goff is urging Aucklanders to remain calm. He says it's not surprising there is a case in New Zealand given what has happened in Australia. He says people need to take every step necessary to stop the spread of the virus. Large queues are forming at supermarkets across the country. Foodstuffs is urging people to shop normally and says its stores have plenty of groceries on the shelves. It's also been storing extra volumes of key essential items. Countdown is preparing its stores for a possible change in alert levels, and it is also urging customers to remain calm. Queues are forming at some Auckland COVID testing centres. There is a long line of cars at the Balmoral Centre, where the queue is moving very slowly. Cars are snaking around the corner at North Care on Auckland's North Shore. In other news, the country's largest nurses' union says the government's announcement that it has agreed to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to settle a gender pay gap will not change strike plans. The majority female workforce is seeking to be paid the same as men with similar skill levels in other professions. Nurses' Organisation spokeswoman Glenda Alexander says pay equity is only one part of their dispute. Those are your headlines. Time is now 36 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā, nau mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa I nai nei, ko Nona Peltier, who's in the studio to talk business. Wow, how has the market reacted to this news that there is a COVID case in the community in Auckland?
Yeah, swiftly, I would say. And we saw that with the movement in the New Zealand dollar against the currencies we typically talk about. The US dollar, the Australian and the British pence. The Kiwi dropped a half a cent against the Australian and the New Zealand dollar. And it was moving down the last I looked, and who knows where it's going to end. This isn't going to be the end of the whatever movements as we go through the day. One of the things that's really quite interesting is that we spoke with the ASB chief economist, Nick Tuffley. What did he think the reaction was likely to be? He said that with the Reserve Bank reviewing the OCR tomorrow, that all bets were off. He said that the market had been pricing in an increase in the official cash rate from 0.25% to something more than that. And now it's not so certain. And so that's one of the reasons why we saw this reaction. This is what he had to say.
It's certainly been the one caveat for a rate hike, whether it would go ahead or not. So I think by the time the Reserve Bank gets to make its decision on Wednesday, it will have a bit more information. But look, it's going to make it touch and go. The issue we have in the background is that the economy is at that point where it does look like it needs a little bit less stimulus than what it's got. And over the longer term, we'll see interest rates go higher. I think the thing for New Zealand is if we do have another lockdown that's sparked by this latest case, it's likely to be enacted relatively quickly and therefore not last too long. So the scarring impact of it on the economy would likely be minimal.
Now, so that was Nick Tuffley, ASB chief economist, yeah. And have you got some other market numbers for us as well, Nona?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I've got the top 50 index, so that's the top 50 index of companies. It dropped 0.2%. Now, that was higher earlier, and that was one of the reasons why it was doing really well was because Fisher & Paykel Healthcare was leading the way. Not surprising.
Yeah.
So we dropped 0.2%, 89 points down to 12,635. And the dollar, as I said earlier, has been steadily tracking downwards this afternoon. It's currently trading at 69.4 US cents. Now, before the announcement about the community case, we were at 70.2 US cents. We are trading at 95 cents Australian versus 95.9 prior to the announcement, and 50.2 British pence versus 50.7 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business news there. People across the Motu have headed to supermarkets in big numbers following the announcement of a community case of COVID in Auckland. Police say they're aware of lengthy queues outside supermarkets throughout Tamaki Makaurau as well. They're increasing police numbers at those locations to provide both the workers and the public with reassurance. Countdown spokeswoman Kiri Hannafin joins me now. Kia ora, Kiri.
Oh, kia ora, Lisa. How are you?
I'm well, but what's happening at your stores right now?
Well, we've got reports that they're getting busier. It sort of started off quite slowly, which we're very pleased about, thinking this would be good, and they're getting a little bit busier now. But yeah, we're sort of hoping that New Zealanders feel confident that they can keep shopping normally and we'll be fine like we've been before.
So just remind them, Kitty, how are the stores looking? Do you have enough loo paper for everybody? What's the sit rep there?
Yeah, so the stores are okay. Obviously, we've been planning, scenario planning for a community case again, and a community case that's Delta. And we're in a great position, I guess, to not only have done it before in New Zealand in terms of COVID, but our business in Australia is deeply impacted by Delta at the moment with about, 1,000 team off just in New South Wales alone. So we kind of feel quite confident with our processes. We're already putting in place safety measures today in Auckland in anticipation for a lockdown. So we feel quite confident that we can keep our team and our customers safe. And I guess, in terms of supply, if everybody just shops like they normally would in a given day or week, then we will have enough food and groceries for everybody. So, but that's the key. If New Zealanders shop normally, then we can supply the stores normally, and so it goes. So it really is up to us all to do the right thing. And if we do and we shop normally, then our stores will be absolutely fine.
Kitty, do you know something we don't, or are you just preparing for a lockdown to be prepared?
Do you mean in terms of the work we'll be doing around Delta?
No, just today. I mean, you've put out a statement saying you are preparing for a change in alert level protocols. Is that because you know something's coming, or you're just wanting to be prepared?
I'm just wanting to be prepared, I guess. And, we've been watching what the government have been saying in the last, 10 days around what would happen if Delta came, and they've said they'd go, quick and hard, and I guess, so we're anticipating that. But also, I guess, even if the lockdown doesn't transpire tonight, at least if we're asked what did we do this afternoon, I can say that we put, we put social distancing in place, we upped hygiene straight away, that we did what we could in anticipation. So hopefully, fingers crossed we don't, but if we do, then our stores, particularly in Auckland, are already gearing up. We're getting security in place in Auckland. So we're just in case, because we know that when we're prepared and when our stores are prepared, then we can help people feel at ease, we can help the community feel at ease, and, it's sort of better to be safe than sorry.
Kerry, you talked about scenario planning and planning for a scenario that involves Delta. So how is that different for you as, supermarket operators versus what we would call the old version of COVID?
So what we've seen, and I mean, it's terrible to have a test bed that's so close to home, but what we've seen in Australia, much more than the original kind of variants of COVID. So at the moment where Delta is so prolific, is it's really, really impacting trading and team. So as I say, just in New South Wales, there's 1,100 team off. There's team in ICU who are very unwell. We've had to close down distribution centres because we just haven't got enough staff to run them. So that, when we're talking about critical infrastructure like a DC going down, we want to make sure in New Zealand, where we've only got 4 DCs, that we can operate those in a way that there's no chance.
So, Kitty, those are the centres, they're distribution centres that feed the supplies into the supermarkets that the public go into.
That's right. So if a DC went down in Auckland, a distribution centre went down in Auckland because of COVID, that would interrupt food supply for all of the country. So we already have very strong COVID protocols in place, like we have separate shifts so that we can have one shift always that isn't connecting with the other shift. So we're always safe. But, we've always had that, but we're just overlaying what we're seeing our colleagues do in Woolworths to make sure that we've got the best kind of processes and practice in place if we do get a Delta outbreak, so that we are able to open stores safely and have as many team, and customers through the door every day.
Where are you busiest at the moment, Kitty? Is it just in Auckland or further afield?
No, everywhere, but probably most busy in central Auckland.
Good luck, Kitty.
And online's very busy.
Thank you for your time this evening. That's Kitty Hannafin, who's the spokesperson for Countdown. Now, queues are also forming at COVID testing stations, and our reporter Nick Trubridge is at a testing station in the Auckland suburb of Balmoral. Nick, how is it looking there? Because it's not a particularly nice night either, is it?
No, it's not nice at all, Lisa. We're getting drenched, but that's okay. Well, as you say, we're at Balmoral Testing Station. You can see a couple of tents set up behind me. They've been going, well, like the clappers really for the last hour, or at least since that one community case was announced. And if we just pan around a little bit for the people who are listening, not watching, there's probably about... there would be about 60 or so cars here at the moment. They go all the way around the bend and stop right behind me. And I can tell you, I come down this road pretty regularly. It has not been like this for a while. So I guess that one case spurring people back into action. Maybe this is what people were talking about when they were saying we're getting a little bit slack on scanning. Maybe we're getting a little bit slack on testing as well, because I can assure you I would drive past here once a week. I have not seen it like this in months.
Nick, do we know how late that testing station is open till?
I believe they're going... in fact, look, I'll ask them, what time do you guys close? I don't know if you heard that, but they say they're not sure yet. So they'll be going, well, you could imagine into the night. What are we up to? We're nearly up to 6 o'clock when that announcement's happening. So not sure yet. Who knows? Could be 9 o'clock, could be later.
Thanks, Nick. That is Nick Trubridge, who's outside a testing station in Balmoral. As he said there, a big queue, up to 60 cars, and it's not fantastic weather. In fact, it's chucking down there. An update now on the power situation. Transpower is warning of potential disruption to power supplies with a wire falling from a tower in the Weka Pass area of North Canterbury. The grid operator is requesting more power generation immediately, and says while the market is currently stable, it may not be able to meet demand if there is a major plant failure. Transpower has asked lines companies in the North Island to reduce all controllable demand, such as hot water. If that doesn't get enough of a drop in demand, it says another notice will be issued, setting further targets. Let's head to Australia now. New South Wales remains deep in crisis. 452 new local cases of COVID-19 were announced today. Further south, there's anxiety about the situation in Melbourne. The city's lockdown has been extended until at least September as authorities struggle to get on top of the community spread. 24 new cases today in Victoria, 10 of which were infectious in the community. The nighttime curfew is back and even Melbourne's playgrounds have been closed. The ABC's Isabel Rowe has this report.
For Dan Johnston's wife and 2 young children, the local playground is a brief reprieve from the 4 walls of home.
Pretty much every day of lockdown is a day that she goes to the playground, once in the afternoon, once in the morning. Evie, our eldest, really enjoys going to the playground. Every time she goes, her face lights up. She runs around, she gets on the swing, she goes up and down the slide, climbing on the wall.
The Melbourne father is worried about his daughter's well-being, with playgrounds now off limits under Melbourne's strict lockdown extension.
Her physical development has been really strongly linked to her interaction with playgrounds. So we've had to halt that. It's terrible. I think it's psychologically devastating, and I really feel for young mums out there who have young kids, who have no family in Victoria, and they have nothing else that they can go and do.
Victoria's Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton acknowledges closing playgrounds is tough, but the government says it can't risk adults mingling in what's a crucial time for the state's COVID response. Victoria's 6th lockdown has been extended until the 2nd of September, with mystery cases still in the community. And other tough rules are back, including the controversial 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew. The Chief Commissioner of Victoria Police, Shane Patton, has told ABC Radio Melbourne it wasn't his idea.
I didn't recommend it. I was asked what I thought about it. I had discussions with State Controller. I was also briefed, as were others, by the Chief Health Officer for the reasons why, and I'm supportive of that curfew.
The tourism industry is bracing for impact that lasts much longer than early September.
Until state premiers around Australia no longer require lockdowns, tourism is essentially dead.
Alex Hill heads Adventure Tourism Victoria, representing accommodation and hospitality venues across the state.
I think there's going to be a complete evaporation and decimation of consumer confidence over the next 3 months. I believe that when a lockdown finishes, there's going to be a little period of time where we're able to enjoy freedoms, but that doesn't mean at all that consumer confidence will return at all. Those are the times when funding is taken away, and that's the time that you actually really need it the most.
The expectation is that Victoria and New South Wales will battle COVID outbreaks and endure some restrictions until vaccination rates reach 70 or 80%. New South Wales has surpassed 5 million doses, but the majority of those are in Sydney. Worryingly, vaccination rates in the Indigenous community are low. Just 8% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in the state are fully vaccinated. And there are now almost 100 COVID cases in the Western New South Wales Local Health District. Most are Aboriginal people. Dubbo Mayor Stephen Lawrence says they should have been vaccinated.
We always knew that our Aboriginal community was going to be especially vulnerable to COVID-19 and especially hard to reach in terms of vaccination. And look, that has certainly turned out to be the case. A lot of criticisms are being made.
A vaccination push in the area has seen 1,000 jabs administered in the last 4 days.
It is 10 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Hei muriaki i ngā pita pita kōrero. After the news at 6, we'll take you live to Parliament for the Prime Minister's announcement. New Zealanders with families in Afghanistan are desperate to be reunited with their loved ones. New Zealand is sending one of its Hercules aircraft and 40 Defence Force troops to help with a wider rescue operation after the Taliban took over all major Afghan cities. But Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern can't guarantee when this will happen. Kate Gregan reports.
Aucklander Amin Bakhsh feels helpless. His wife and toddler are trapped in Kabul.
They're locked inside the house. They cannot go out. They're in fear of their lives and they don't know what's going to happen to them.
Their visa process was delayed and Amin says they haven't slept in 2 days.
They can't sleep out of fear. They are watching constantly at the door if somebody is coming, or any small movement or noise could disturb them in a way that cannot be imaginable.
He says he's tried to contact different authorities, even offering to go to Afghanistan himself to help extract those who are trapped. But he's been met with a wall of silence. Amin says the government should have acted sooner.
They could have prevented this, should have paid a little bit of attention, but now that everything is out of control at our individual capacities, we are not able to do anything.
More than 50 New Zealanders and at least 200 Afghanis who helped New Zealand's efforts there are expected to be repatriated. Jacinda Ardern says the government is doing everything it can.
At the moment, our immediate focus is on those who have worked alongside our New Zealand Defence Force and their immediate family, their dependents. That's a group that could be in the order of 200, and we are prioritising at that point that group, but then looking more broadly at how many, for instance, may in the meantime have applied for visas into New Zealand.
Askar Habibi is an interpreter who worked alongside the Defence Force in Afghanistan. He came to New Zealand in 2013 with his wife and 3 children, but he's terrified for his extended family and is desperate for the government to rescue them.
It is a very dangerous situation for the people who work with the foreign troops. And then, of course, as I work in Bamiyan, Bamiyan is a very little town and villages. It's so easy to find the relative or the family of the interpreters or the people who used to work with New Zealand militaries or police.
Do you have friends and family still there?
Yes, I've got family members, my brothers and my wife's brothers and mother, so they're all in danger. And I couldn't get hold of them since the Bamiyan was collapsed because they might hiding somewhere or they, been captured by Taliban.
How worried are you for them?
Very, very worried. Yeah, I cannot describe, my feeling in words.
The Defence Force expects the operation will take at least a month.
Meanwhile, Kabul remains in chaos after the Taliban swept in. Western nations continue to evacuate people at an airport clogged with residents desperate to flee. Many in Afghanistan are incredibly fearful of Taliban rule. CNN's Clarissa Ward is one of the few Western journalists still in Kabul.
As soon as we leave our compound, it's clear who is now in charge. Taliban fighters have flooded the capital. Smiling and victorious, they took this city of 6 million people in a matter of hours, barely firing a shot.
This is a sight I honestly thought I would never see. Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy compound.
Some carry American weapons. They tell us they're here to maintain law and order. Everything is under control. Everything will be fine, the commander says. Nobody should worry.
What's your message to America right now?
America already spent enough time in Afghanistan. They need to leave, he tells us. They already lost lots of lives and lots of money. People come up to them to pose for photographs.
chanting death to America, but they seem friendly at the same time. It's utterly bizarre.
Almost everywhere we go, it seems the Taliban want to talk.
A lot of people are very frightened that you might engage in revenge attacks against security forces.
Alhamdulillah. Since yesterday, we've proved that nothing will happen, and we give assurance to everyone that they will be safe, Mauli Murtaza tells us, and we follow our leaders. Once we make a promise, we stick to it. Maintaining law and order is top of that list of promises. At the presidential palace, the Taliban are now guarding the gate. They say they're here to fill the vacuum left when the government fled. But the welcoming spirit only extends so far, and my presence soon creates tension.
It's because of you. They've just told me to stand to the side because I'm a woman.
It is 4 minutes to 6. Stay with us. We'll go live to the Beehive shortly to hear from the Prime Minister and Director General of Health. One case of COVID-19 was reported by health authorities about 2:30 this afternoon. Cabinet's been meeting and the Prime Minister will announce the government's response at a media conference that is due to start at 6. We'll go there as soon as it happens. The Wellington region has been bombarded with a series of weather-related incidents causing havoc to trains and roads today. A landslip this morning took out two of the main commuter routes with a train derailed and part of State Highway 1 flooded. The railway line between Porirua and Paikakariki will remain closed overnight and State Highway 1 reopened just before 5 this evening. Our reporter Kirsty Frame has more.
The chaos began just before 7 o'clock this morning after stormwater and debris slid down the Paikakariki Hill on the Kapiti coast onto the main commuter routes into the capital. The water and debris blocked the Kapiti Line railway track and flooded the southbound lane of State Highway 1, causing severe traffic delays for the entire day. Paikakariki local Mauricio Tudauda woke up to sirens and received a call from the local fire services asking him to open his nearby restaurant, the Fisherman's Table. There were 90 passengers on the train and they needed somewhere to shelter.
They were very quiet for about 10 minutes and then they all began chatting after that. And there were ambulance services here too. So the ambulance services did help some people. They got minor bruises.
Mr. Tordalda says it's lucky no one was seriously injured in the derailing. Paikakariki Volunteer Fire Service Chief Paul Furfai was on the scene this morning and says it appears the debris had blocked culverts in the area, leading it to spilling over the train tracks and down onto the highway below. He says the road and trains are consistently congested.
When you get something that goes wrong, like this morning for instance, it tends to affect a vast amount of people simply because we've got, 2 pounds going into a 1 pound bag, if you like, when it comes to the traffic and flow of that area.
There were major delays for motorists in the area for the remainder of the day, with wait times stretching well above an hour at peak times. During the day, Waka Kotahi advised motorists to even avoid the alternative Paikakariki Hill Road due to worsening weather conditions. As Paul Furfai says, the opening of Transmission Gully, an alternative route into Wellington, couldn't come sooner.
The fact that we've got this Transmission Gully Road going in will alleviate that to a greater extent. We will still have issues in that area, but it won't be as, it won't affect us as much because it's just one corridor that we're using at the moment.
There was wild weather all across the region today, with the second landslip blocking the Johnsonville Railway this afternoon. Services were suspended between the northern suburb and Wellington City, but reopened this afternoon. The Hutt Valley River flooded into a car park in Lower Hutt City, and some cars needed to be towed out. Met Service is warning those in the Wellington region of the heavy rain and strong winds that's still to come overnight. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission has opened up an inquiry into the derailment of the train this morning.
If you are just joining us, we're standing very by for a press conference in Wellington with the Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, and the Prime Minister, where we're expecting the latest on this community case.
Ahi Marie, RNZ News at 6, ko Sarah Thompson, tōko ingoa. The police in Auckland say they'll be increasing their presence at supermarkets in the city as lengthy queues form. They say this will be to provide reassurance to both workers and the public after a community case of COVID-19 was detected in the city today. The police are urging people to remain calm. The Auckland Mayor, Phil Goff, is also urging Aucklanders to remain calm as they await further announcements. He says it's not surprising there is a case here, given what has happened in Australia. Mr Goff says what people need to do now is take every step necessary to stop the spread of the virus. RNZ reporter Nick Trubridge has been at the countdown in the suburb of Mount Eden. He says the supermarkets are effectively operating like there is an alert level change, despite one not being announced.
It's pretty hard to get a car park at the moment at Mount Eden Countdown. The line behind us has dissipated a little bit, but I can assure you before there were about 100 people there. As for the things they were shopping for, well, it's the usual things we've come to expect during a lockdown. Really, plenty of rolls of toilet paper going out the door.
Nick Trubridge says there is heavy congestion on the roads in Auckland. A COVID-19 modelling expert is warning that New Zealand will need strict lockdown measures if the Auckland community case is the Delta variant. Health officials are investigating a case that so far can't be linked to the border or to managed isolation. Professor Sean Hendy from the University of Auckland says if it is confirmed to be Delta, a swift move back into lockdown will be needed. He says the situation in Sydney has shown that you have to move decisively. Professor Hendy says there is still a chance officials will find a link to the border, but people should assume the situation is serious. Microbiologist Susie Wiles says Auckland residents should prepare for a snap lockdown. She says the case is likely the Delta variant, which is more transmissible.
So we have to then assume that the best thing is going to be to act hard and fast as we've done in the past. And we have to remember that this Delta variant is so much more infectious than the earlier variants of the virus.
Dr Wiles says the government has made it clear that it will act quickly to control any outbreak. The Chief Ombudsman has received more than 700 complaints since July last year about managed isolation and quarantine. Peter Boscher says the level of complaints is unprecedented. Many people are complaining about the booking system. Mr Boscher says he's met with the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, which runs the facilities, to alert her to the complaints and seek further information. New advice on how the Ombudsman can help people wanting to complain about MIQ is now on his website. He's also conducting independent inspections of MIQ facilities under a United Nations protocol. Transpower is asking lines companies to reduce power to North Island homes after a wire fell from a tower in North Canterbury. The system operator is warning that if any generation plant was to fail now, there would not be enough power to satisfy this evening's demand. Transpower says it is asking generators for more power and asking North Island lines firms to reduce electricity power to controllable demand, such as hot water. It says that if it doesn't reduce demand to a safe level, it will issue a new target to generators. Transpower says repair crews are already on site to fix the broken cable in the Weka Pass area in Waikari. The latest grid emergency notice comes just 8 days after Transpower asked firms to cut power from thousands of homes. The police are appealing for the public's help after a newborn baby's body was found among recycling waste in Auckland. Detective Inspector Scott Baird says the staff called police, who started a scene investigation last night in Onehunga. Officers have been talking to hospital staff and going through CCTV. Mr Baird says they're concerned the mother may need urgent attention.
If somebody knows a mother who's been pregnant is now no longer, and doesn't have the baby, or she's spoken to someone, or they just suspect, just contact us, and then we'll do, because we want to get the support around her with family, friends, and just make sure that she's okay, and particularly medically.
A post-mortem will be carried out tomorrow. It's now 6:04. First home buyers in Auckland may have to stump up with an extra $90,000 under new lending rules. The Reserve Bank is halving the amount of low deposit lending banks can offer from October, meaning most buyers will need a 20% deposit. CoreLogic senior property economist Kelvin Davidson says first home buyers will be hard hit. Those in Wellington can expect to pay an extra $80,000 for a deposit, while first home buyers in Christchurch face paying an extra $50,000. Moving now into sport. New Zealand's 29 Paralympians will arrive in Tokyo as Japan extends COVID-19 emergency measures. The New Zealand team chef de mission, Paula Tesorio, a former Paralympian herself, has just arrived in Tokyo and says they are putting in additional safety precautions. Tesorio says the team is due to arrive on Thursday and will be split across 3 different accommodation blocks and operate in separate bubbles aligned with their sport.
Everybody's made a decision, their own decision, to be at the Games. Just been about providing support for those who want to talk through their health concerns. Our medical team have done that, and making sure that we continue to reinforce safe practices.
The draw for October's T20 Cricket World Cup in October has been confirmed, with New Zealand to play Pakistan in their tournament opener. New Zealand's pool also includes former champions India and Afghanistan and 2 yet-to-be-decided qualifiers. The Wallabies thrashing at the hands of the All Blacks at the weekend has prompted former Australia international Matt Giteau to back a call to abandon the eligibility rule for overseas players, a rule which is named after him. Rugby Australia CEO Andy Marinos has said the Giteau rule, which excludes foreign-based players from Wallabies selection if they have less than 60 test caps, might be scrapped before the end of the season. In the wake of Saturday's record 57-22 loss to the All Blacks, Giteau says the rule needs to go so Australia can be competitive. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Tony Stamp samples the latest album from the global superstar Billie Eilish. Brian Roper offers an eco-socialist response to the latest IPCC report on climate change. And just when your worldview couldn't get any more cynical, we present the BBC documentary Bad Cops, the story of a task force set up to control gun violence that ended up becoming the most corrupt squad in the USA. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now there's short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rapa Wednesday. For Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, a period of rain and squally thunderstorms today, then showers heavy and possibly thundery at times tomorrow. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, generally fine, but rain for a time today and showers tomorrow morning. For Waitomo to Wellington, including Taihape, also Wairarapa, periods of rain or showers with some heavy and possibly thundery falls, easing tomorrow evening. Severe northwest gales about Wellington and Wairarapa, easing this afternoon. For Nelson, Buller and Westland, also Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha. Showers heavy and possibly thundery at times, clearing from the south tomorrow morning or afternoon. A few showers returning to the west coast late tomorrow. For Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, occasional showers, some may be heavy and thundery today. And for the Chatham Islands, showers turning to rain for a time tonight. Possible thunderstorms later tomorrow. Northerlies rising to gale tonight, then easing tomorrow. That concludes your short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rapa Wednesday. The time is now 8 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā, e hono mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A case of COVID-19 has been detected in Auckland this afternoon. Cabinet's been meeting and was getting the latest advice. We're waiting on a news conference from the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and the Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. It has been delayed ever so slightly, but we will take you there live as soon as it starts. In the meantime, our health correspondent, Rowan Quinn, joins me now. Rowan, bring us up to date. What do we know about this case?
Well, we had notification from the Ministry of Health at about 2:30 today that there was a new case in the community. It's been a long time since that's happened, and so it was a bit of a surprise. And now, since then, contact tracing teams in Auckland have been interviewing this person to try to find out where they've been. You know, we know the drill, so that they can get in touch with anyone who may be spreading this further. And the government has then, all the cabinet ministers had a quick phone meeting about it. At the same time, all of the government departments involved, the police, the Ministry of Health, the MB, which runs the MIQ, they've all been meeting as well. And then now there's been a more formal cabinet meeting taking place now to find out what the response will be, and that's what we're waiting to hear now.
So, You have seen us go into lockdown before. What are going to be the critical considerations that they are taking into account when they look at this case and its origins? I mean, what are they looking for when they make the decisions?
Well, I guess at the moment the biggest concern is the fact there's no known link to the border. So that's something that if they found a direct link to the border, perhaps they might say, OK, we've got the chain of transmission, it's quite small, it's contained, we don't need to go into too big a lockdown. But that was then. This is Delta times now. You know, we have every case that's come into the community in New Zealand from the 11th of July to the 9th of August was Delta. This is cases that have been found at MIQ. So we know that Delta from overseas, it spreads very quickly. It has a shorter incubation period and a longer period where people are infectious. So the government has indicated before that if there's a Delta strain, if they don't know where it's come from, they are going to act very quickly to lock us down as soon as possible.
And I see you've got the statement there from the Ministry of Health. They in fact reiterated that, didn't they, about the kind of approach we might expect this afternoon?
That's right. They said a hard and early response is the best tool to stamp out any potential spread. And everyone in New Zealand's asked to stay calm and to play their part.
I'm just going to jump in there, Rowan, because we're seeing the Prime Minister approaching the podium in Wellington. She's accompanied by the Director General of Health and is about to speak with the latest update. So we'll take you there now live as they prepare to tell us what's happening with this community COVID case that has been discovered in Auckland this afternoon.
Good evening, everyone. As we advised earlier this afternoon, we have a positive case of COVID-19 in the community. We will not be in a position to identify if this is a case of the Delta variant of COVID-19 until genome sequencing is returned tomorrow. However, every case we have had in MIQ recently has been the Delta variant of COVID, and Delta is surging around the world. While we cannot confirm it yet, we need to assume that our case will be too, and that has shaped all of the decisions we have made this afternoon. Public health officials have been working at pace this afternoon to gather information on the case and their movements, and I will pass to Dr. Bloomfield shortly to set out the facts as we currently know them, including locations of interest that have been identified so far. But first, I want to assure New Zealand that we have planned for this eventuality and that we will now be putting in place that plan to contain and stamp out COVID-19 once again. Going hard and early has worked for us before. While we know that Delta is a more dangerous enemy to combat, the same actions that overcame the virus last year can be applied to beat it again. I'll now pass to Dr. Bloomfield.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Kia ora koutou katoa. So just to update you on the details around the community case that we announced this afternoon. To recap, just after midday I was alerted to a positive COVID-19 test result in Auckland. This case was identified when the person presented to their GP yesterday, Monday, with symptoms and was tested. So, to start with, I want to thank both the person who has tested positive and, of course, the general practice. We can only act on cases if we know they are there as soon as possible. The case is a 58-year-old male from a household in Devonport on the North Shore of Auckland. He became symptomatic on Saturday the 14th of August, so the infectious period is considered to have started on Thursday the 12th of August. Importantly, and this has been fundamental to our advice to the government, at this point there is no obvious link between this case and the border. Whole genome sequencing is being rapidly carried out at ESR's Auckland laboratory for this case, and we expect to have the results through in the early hours of tomorrow morning. The whole genome sequencing will help us learn about this infection and whether or not it is confirmed to be one of the Delta variants we have seen overseas, and it should also give us information about potential links to other cases. You will be aware that every case that we have in New Zealand in managed isolation, the sample goes to ESR for testing, for whole genome sequencing. That's not always successful, but we have a database, of course, of all the previous ones that have been sequenced successfully. So it will help us with our source investigation. In the meantime, as the Prime Minister said, we are assuming this is the Delta variant, as all of the genomes sequenced over the last at least 3 weeks, and in fact all but one since late June have been Delta variant. The person lives with his wife, who was also tested yesterday, and yesterday returned a negative test. Both individuals have been self-isolating at home until this point. On their earlier movements, the couple travelled by private vehicle on Friday the 13th of August to Coromandel Township and stayed the weekend there, returning to Auckland on 15th of August. The case has a small number of workplace contacts who are isolating and being tested. The man is not vaccinated, but was in the process of actively booking his vaccination, had trouble with the website, but had been making efforts to do that. His wife is fully vaccinated. I do want to commend the case for being a frequent user of the New Zealand COVID Tracer app, and this tool has helped very much in helping us speed up identifying locations of interest. We have identified at last count 23 locations of interest, 13 in and around Coromandel Township and 10 in Auckland. I have 5 of those which I'll just run through now. These and any subsequent ones that are confirmed will be added to the Ministry of Health's website. These 5 locations are all around Coromandel. Importantly, the Star and Garter Hotel in Coromandel on the 13th of August between 6:39 and 7:40. The Umu Cafe in Coromandel on the 13th of August between 7:40 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. The Star and Garter Hotel in Coromandel on the 14th of August, that was the Saturday, between 7:11 p.m. and 9 p.m. The BP gas station in Coromandel on Saturday the 14th between 9:30 a.m. and 9:40 a.m. and Terrace Beads in Coromandel on the 15th of August between 10 a.m. and 10:05 a.m. The instructions for anyone who has been at those locations of interest at the time specified is to immediately self-isolate and call Healthline on 0800 3585 453 for advice about what to do. These locations and others will be on our website, as will be clear instructions about what people are required to do. Now, I should say that there will be people from outside of Auckland and Coromandel who may have visited and have been at these locations of interest, the ones that we've identified and subsequent ones. So it's important for anyone who has been in these locations over the last week to check our website and see if they are included. If you are, wherever you are in the country, you are required under a Health Act Section 70 order to follow the instructions around isolation and testing. There will also likely be locations that are en route between the Coromandel and Auckland, so once again, do keep an eye on that information on the Ministry website, and we will publish it as it becomes available. Further interviews are underway to help establish how this case was infected and further details on his movements. I understand people will be concerned, however, I do want to assure people both in Auckland and Coromandel and indeed across the country, we are taking the necessary actions immediately to limit the spread of the virus. Our systems have already swung into action to gather up the facts. An important action from here is that we identify, of course, any other potential cases that are out there. So there are testing centres open across metropolitan Auckland until 8 p.m. tonight, so extended hours. All testing locations nationwide are available on the HealthPoint website. There will be additional testing centres across Tamaki Makaurau tomorrow, further details, and likewise we're wanting anybody around the country, if they have symptoms at all, to be tested, so all DHBs will be ensuring there is good testing capacity and that is accessible, including extended hours right across the country. The most recent wastewater testing result for the North Shore was on the 11th of August, and that was negative. A sample taken yesterday is being analysed presently, and we will have the results tomorrow. Daily sampling will now be undertaken, and ESR is looking at options for sampling around Coromandel. Additional public precautions, particularly around visitors, will be in place, of course, in relevant hospitals. So this case was identified in Auckland, but it is a national issue. Because we cannot link the case to the border at this point, it is possible there are other cases around in Auckland and other possible chains of transmission. People from around the country will have travelled to Auckland and back to other parts of New Zealand. Therefore, whilst it's a case identified in Auckland, it requires us all to be part of the response. Hard work from everyone across the country will help us get on top of this outbreak. There's been a huge amount of work already over the past few hours by teams here and in Auckland. There will be people working into the night to carry on that response. But the health system cannot do it alone. As always, it is together that we will make a difference. Back to you, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Dr. Bloomfield. As I said, we are assuming that we have a case of Delta that we are dealing with. International evidence and science around the Delta variant of COVID-19 shows that it is potentially twice as infectious and more liable to cause severe illness. As Professor Skegg's report set out last week, with Delta raging around the world, it was experts' view that it was not a matter of if but when. As it is, we are one of the last countries in the world to have the Delta variant in our community. This has given us the chance to learn from others. And while this is a situation no one wants to be in, there are benefits to being amongst the last. We are in the position to learn from experience overseas and what actions work and what actions don't work. On that front, Delta has been called a game changer, and it is. It means we need to again go hard and early to stop the spread. We have seen what can happen elsewhere if we fail to get on top of it. We only get one chance. That's why Cabinet has met this afternoon and made the decision that New Zealand will move to Alert Level 4 from 11:59 p.m. tonight. Level 4 will be for an initial period of 3 days, except for Auckland and the Coromandel Peninsula, who we anticipate will likely be at Level 4 for 7 days, due to them being most closely linked to our current case. Over this time, we will be looking for testing results from people from locations of interest, wastewater testing, and general community testing of those with cold and flu symptoms elsewhere in the country. Our plan over the coming days is assess if there are undetected chains of transmission elsewhere to track down the source case and to assure ourselves that there aren't other cases in the community elsewhere. We have made decisions on the basis that it is better to start high and go down levels rather than start too low, not contain the virus, and see it move quickly. We've seen the dire consequences of taking too long to act in other countries, not least our neighbours. Just as we successfully stayed home and saved lives last year, I'm asking the team of 5 million to unite once more to defeat what is likely to be this more dangerous and transmissible variant of the virus. Now, I want to come back to what Level 4 involves, given it has been a year since we used this, the highest alert level that we have. The underlying principle for Level 4 is reduce down contact between people to a bare minimum, essential contact only. That means the simplest thing New Zealanders can do to stop the spread of the virus is to stay at home. Beating Delta means lifting our game. Delta spreads more easily via the air, so physical distancing is even more important. As we've seen overseas, particularly in Sydney, unnecessary trips outdoors have spread the virus and mean communities have not been able to get on top of it. So I ask New Zealanders to please follow the rules to the letter. Let me quickly expand on each of the reasons for leaving your home briefly and some of the common questions that you might have. The reasons for leaving your home under Alert Level 4 include physical exercise in your neighbourhood, visiting the supermarket, dairy or pharmacy, necessary medical care, or getting a test. And if you undertake these activities, please wear a mask when you leave the house. Let me expand in a little more detail on each of those reasons for leaving your home. People in the past have asked if they can leave their home for a walk, for instance. Yes, you can. or to take your children out on their scooters, for instance. But we ask people to stay 2 metres away from anyone you pass. Stay local and do not congregate. Don't talk to your neighbours. Please keep to your bubbles. It comes down again to those very simple principles. We know from overseas cases of the Delta variant that it can be spread by people simply walking past one another. So keep those movements outside to the bare minimum, wear a mask, and make sure you keep up that physical distancing. The bubble is back. The people in your bubble should be the people in your immediate household or those dependent on you. Once you go into a bubble, you must stay in it, and others cannot join. That risks spreading COVID. If you are completely isolated or you live alone, remember you can join a bubble with one other person that you have contact with. It needs to be just you and that person, though. You must be faithful to them, and they must be faithful to you. Those in those circumstances will remember those rules from our last level 4. If you have multiple contacts with others, that is where the risk increases, and we cannot afford that. You can drive locally to your supermarket to get food, but again, we ask that you maintain your physical distance, again, to 2 metres from others who may be undertaking essential errands, and again, please wear a mask. Other than that, we're asking people to stay home. Only shop when you need to. And it is preferable that there is just one person per household that goes shopping to reduce any risk of spread, and that they follow the instructions of staff. Remember to always act like you have COVID-19. Stay clear of others. Don't put them in harm's way in the same way you'd expect that they don't put you in harm's way. There will be economic support available, and I will ask Minister Robertson to outline the available measures at the conclusion of this first introductory press conference and questions. On vaccinations, we will be suspending vaccinations for 48 hours while we ensure that vaccinations are unable to be take place in a safe environment, both for our vaccinators and those who may be visiting. We have currently 40% of our eligible population vaccinated with at least 1 dose. We want that to continue safely, and when we can, we will. We will provide a further update on that in the next 24 hours. I want to finish by acknowledging our frontline workers. The most important thing we can do to acknowledge their work is to only leave home for the reasons that I have described. I know that one of the worst things about COVID-19 is the absolute uncertainty that it creates, but we know more now than we did a year ago. We know that this strategy works. We know that we are a strong team of 5 million, and we know that life will get easier. We just need to keep going. We'll both be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. to provide you with an update of all of the information that we have. Till then, please take care and please be kind to one another. We're happy to take questions.
Prime Minister, how likely is it those lockdowns could be extended if you're taking this harder and faster and more cautious response than ever?
As it stands, the decision to go for 7 days was because we didn't want to provide for those areas that really are closely linked to this case any false hope by saying it would be a short lockdown. At this stage, we don't know. So we wanted to give a clear indication it is most likely to be 7. We keep it under constant advisement. And for the rest of the country, that's why I've indicated at this stage that we're working to 3.
What was the issue with the case? Perhaps you could address this, Dr. Luca. What was the issue with the case not being able to access the vaccine booking system?
Just reported that he had an issue with the website. But again, his wife has been fully vaccinated and he was in the process of doing so.
Does that have on how infectious Delta could be, though, because he'd be less infectious, wouldn't he, had he been able to get that vaccination?
Mixed results on that at the moment.
Yes, so he was making every attempt to book in his vaccination. He's in that age group between 55 and 60 that has just come online in the last week or two. So I did want to convey that even though he is not vaccinated, and I put myself in that group, I have my first vaccination booked, he was making every effort to be vaccinated, and indeed, as the PM said, his wife was vaccinated.
What is your message?
And the one thing that I would also add, yes, we're seeing evidence that suggests for that first dose something in the range of 30% reduction in the likelihood of transmission. but it is not 100%. And so that's why vaccinated people should follow the rules like everybody else. We need everyone to play their part here.
Over in Australia,
And if you are just joining us now, Cabinet has decided to move the entire country, into alert level 4 from this evening at 11:59pm. That is alert level 4 throughout the country. That alert level will last 3 days for everywhere outside of Auckland. Auckland and Coromandel District will be 7 days at alert level 4. That lockdown comes into place at 11:59 this evening. The Prime Minister saying they need time to assess this case and detect the chain of transmission. Rowan Quinn, our health correspondent, is in the studio with me now. So just sum up for us what we now know about this case.
Well, we now know that it's a 58-year-old man from Devonport, that he was symptomatic on the 14th of August. That's Saturday. He was then assumed to be infectious from the 12th of August. He has a small number of work contacts, but crucially he travelled to Coromandel for 3 days, and there are a number of contacts there. His wife is negative for the virus. She was fully vaccinated, interestingly. He was not. He said that he had been trying to book his vaccine, but he was struggling to get on the website to be able to do that.
And also a number of locations of interest. So what is the situation there?
That's right. So far we mostly know about the places in Coromandel. I'll quickly run through them. There's the Star and Garter Hotel on both the 13th and the 14th of August. There's Umu Cafe in Coromandel. There's the BP gas station on the 14th of August and Terrace Beads on the 15th of August. Now, this is just the initial information available. There's many more. I think there was a total of 23 cases of interest that they said there. Most of them in Coromandel, but some of them also in Auckland. And Ashley Bloomfield indicated there will be some likely en route between the two places as well, but that's what contact tracers are just going through now with the man to try and find out exactly where he's been. And Ashley Bloomfield said he did actually use the COVID Tracer app quite extensively.
Yeah, so check out the Ministry of Health website for those locations of interest. If you were there at the same time, they're advising you to stay at home, ring their healthline and find out what to do next. So we're moving into level 4. It's been a while, Rowan, so what does that mean?
Yeah, well, that is the tight lockdown where it is the stick to your bubble and make your bubble a small bubble. So you stick within your very small, mostly household bubbles. There's some allowance to have one person to help with childcare or company, but it must be just the two of you, no other contacts
An
outside
exclusive
of
relationship.
Exactly, exclusive relationship. You can go out for exercise, but it must be in your neighbourhood. People might remember that from last time we were in level 4. You can't go wandering all over the show. The Prime Minister has said you need to wear a mask when you leave home. There's very limited amounts of businesses that are open. You can go to get food from your supermarket. You can go to the pharmacy, but anything wider, cafes, retail stores are all closed down. And I think those are the main points, aren't they?
Hunker down,
it's
basically.
Small, it's tight, and it's stay home wherever you can.
Yeah, thanks, Rowan. And I think the other crucial thing that we just need to recap is the Prime Minister says that the vaccination program is suspended for the next 48 hours while they just get their heads around where this infection has come from. So we're back in familiar territory for Auckland at least. The whole country will move to level 4 for 3 days, while Auckland and the Coromandel would likely remain in level 4 for 7 days. The Auckland Mayor, Phil Goff, joins me now. Phil, a sense of deja vu here?
Yeah, it's familiar territory, as you said, but fortunately not for the last 169 days. So we had a great run. It's really disappointing that this has happened now, but scarcely surprising. And anybody that's watched, as I think all of us has, the situation across the Tasman and Sydney know that a soft response to this new Delta variant simply doesn't work. If you're going to do it, go hard, go decisively. That's what the government's done, and I think most New Zealand will get behind them.
So you support this decision 100%?
Oh, absolutely, and I do so in the knowledge this will be really hard for some people. Those that are separated from their families, be tough for them. Businesses and people whose incomes are affected, be tough for them as well. But we have had the experience with the last in the line to contract this particular variant, the Delta variant, and we can learn from what we've seen across the Tasman. happen. And what we've learnt from that is Victoria and taking a tough action worked better. Sydney not taking a tough action, it's now out of control.
When were you given a heads up?
I was given a heads up about 2 o'clock this afternoon. I was due to meet the Prime Minister this afternoon, and ironically I was with Dr Bloomfield yesterday, and we'd talked about it yesterday, and we'd both agreed that it was nearly inevitable that there would be some outbreak, given the pattern everywhere else around the world, but we were treasuring each day that we could keep New Zealanders free from that and living normally. Well, let's take the action, let's do it properly. We've done it before. We've been there, we've succeeded before, we'll do it again.
Some people may have fallen out of the habit, right? It's been a long time since we've had a community outbreak, and they may simply forget the rules, or they may be fatigued by all of this. What is your message to the people who live in your city and beyond?
Well, the message is, to beat this, we have to act collectively. Every one of us has got to follow the rules. We've got to do it not simply for ourselves, but for our family and for our community. So the rules are pretty familiar to most people. You know, if you're not feeling well, self-isolate, get tested. Don't keep within your bubble, but if you have to go out, make sure you're wearing a mask, make sure you're socially distancing, wash your hands frequently, use your QR code, all of those things that we've done before. That's the habit that we need to slip back into, and we need to do it, all of us, and at once.
So what essential services will we still be running through council, and are you going to go out and do the things like you did last time, tape up the playgrounds and all the rest of it? Yeah,
all of the council services that are open to the public practically will be closed. The zoo, the museum, the parks, the playgrounds. Well, the parks you can walk in, but you can't use the playground equipment. We're not going to have halls open. There won't be public gatherings of people. Public toilets will largely be closed except where they're needed by essential workers. And we'll be doing whatever the health authorities request of us. So if they need our help in any way, they need our staff help, we'll give it. Mostly our staff will be staying at home, working from home, but the essential services will continue. So your rubbish will still be collected. If there's something wrong with your water supply or your wastewater, there'll be people there to fix it. Those sort of things are important. Public transport will be pretty much as scheduled. There won't be many people on it, but for essential workers and people needing to do their shopping, if they don't have a car, we'll keep that open. Very expensive. Costs us about $750,000 a day, but we need to provide that for essential workers, and we will do so.
What's happening with homeless people and other vulnerable people who don't have a place to shelter?
Yeah, that's something that our people will need to get on to quickly. Last time we moved to try to ensure that we could get people off the street and into accommodation. We largely succeeded, although there was probably a score of people that simply refused to get off the streets. But we want to try to do that again. In terms of food banks... So will council take responsibility for that, Phil, or are you expecting government to come in and assist? Who's taking the lead? I think we do it together, and we make sure that the Ministry of Social Development is closely aligned with the people that we have out there doing the community patrols and working with the sector, the Housing First sector that can help us house people. So that needs to be done. The food bank that we ran last time through Spark was incredibly successful, but we've now got an effective system of food banks across the city, and the Ministry of Social Development will largely be running that. But we remain open to having our staff help where they can make a real difference, particularly for a health service and a social welfare service that will be under some pressure.
Would you be feeling a bit better about this if we had pushed through more vaccinations? So Auckland vaccinated 800,000. There's, almost that number again who aren't vaccinated.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we all know that it took some time to get the vaccine into the country. We've now got large doses. We've been doing 40,000 people a day. It's been pretty impressive, and since we've had the availability of the vaccine, I understand the government's going to suspend the process for just a couple of days. But I think we're all keen that we get that working again once we just know a little bit more about what's happening with this particular variant. But it does put pressure on all of us. I've had had my two doses already. It puts pressure on everyone in the community. The best way to stay safe, particularly with this new variant, is to make sure that you are vaccinated. So they've extended the groups of people. I think if you're over 50 from this week, you can make your appointment to get vaccinated. And I'm just urging people, forget the nonsense that is being put around by the anti-vaxxers. Make sure you protect yourself, your family and your community. Please get vaccinated. It's been hundreds of millions of people around the world have been vaccinated, and we know it's safe, it is free, and it is available.
Thanks for your time this evening. That is the Auckland Mayor, Phil Goff. Scientists are working hard to find the source of this latest case of COVID-19, looking for potential links through the genome sequencing. Its lead for Genomics is Joop de Ligt, who joins me now. Good evening. What's happening tonight? So we know we've got a COVID-positive case. What's happening with the sequencing from this point?
Yeah, good evening. So what we do is whenever there is a sample like this in the community, we try to process this as urgently as possible. And as we saw back in February, that means that we are able to turn it around well within 24 hours. So that's when the notifications came through, that's when all the wheels started turning, and we started preparing for that to get those results out as soon as we can.
And do you take responsibility for checking whether the sequence matches anything else that's recorded in the system?
Yeah, so that's the database that also Dr. Bloomfield referred to in the stand-up, where we have the collection of previous cases, those the ones that were seen in MIQ. So we compare it against that database to see if there might be any links. But as we've seen in certain previous cases, there's not always a link found, and that could be because that case might not have been picked up, or if the viral load was so low that we could not obtain a genome from it.
How accurate is it in giving you information about how many people are between one infection and the next, and how does it tell you that?
Yeah, so one of the important measures that we use for that is the number of differences that we see in the genome. So the genome is about 30,000 letters long, and each of those letters can change randomly because of the virus making mistakes when it copies itself. So we look at that to tell us a bit about how it is linked to other cases, and also how long there might be. The thing is, with COVID, it doesn't always change. So sometimes there are genomes that we cannot distinguish, but that does indicate that those cases are more closely linked than if there's a number of mutations in between them.
So how many tests would you usually process in a normal day at the moment? Because I'm thinking that you're probably going to have a massive rush after this.
Yeah, so luckily, as we've seen in February, even if there's a larger number of cases, we can cope with that, and we have trained staff now over different sites to handle those, and also to be still operating if there are lockdown measures in place and there would be limited movement. So we've been learning and setting up that capability to process those samples in case there would be increased volumes.
So if you can't get a full genome sequence out of this, will you still be able to determine if it is Delta or not?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that, because Delta is quite different from the other versions of the virus that are now out there, and because it is the most prolific, even if you have only half of the genome, you would still be able to see the hallmarks of Delta, but you would be less able to confidently link it to any one particular case. But since that this case is recent, we are hopeful that we will get a good genome out.
Joop, can you just give us a bit of an idea, in recent days and months, how much Delta are you seeing versus other variants when you get a positive?
Yeah, no, so as Dr. Bloomfield indicated, almost everything that we see is exclusively Delta, especially in the recent weeks. And this is a reflection of Delta outcompeting the older versions of the virus globally. So if we look at Europe and other places where we have travelers coming from, it's almost exclusively Delta what we're seeing there. And we also see that reflected in our travelers and in our MRQ system, and even on the boats.
Thank you for your time this evening. That is Joep de Ligt, who's with ESR and is the lead for Genomics there. And they will be working overtime this evening, as the Director General of Health said. They're expecting that genome sequencing back in the early hours of tomorrow morning. A man in his 50s has tested positive for COVID-19. He's from the Auckland suburb of Devonport and was tested at his GP. Our reporter Nick Trubridge joins me now from downtown Auckland. Nick, have people heard the warning? Are they masked up?
Yeah, Lisa, most people are masked up. I'll tell you where we are first of all. We're down at the ferry terminal in downtown Auckland. This pier just behind me is where people board the ferry over to Devonport, which is of course where this case is from. For people who aren't from Auckland, Devonport is just across the bridge from downtown Auckland. It's a short ferry ride just across the way there. Now, in terms of the details of this case, we know that this gentleman in his 50s became symptomatic on the Saturday. He then went down to his GP on Monday and obviously tested positive after that. It's important to note, though, that they do believe the infectious period started last Thursday. So although he started feeling sick on the Saturday, the infectious period had a couple of days before that, is what Dr. Bloomfield has told us this evening.
Thanks, Nick. That's Nick Trubridge from downtown Auckland. Now, let's just recap the latest from the Prime Minister's announcement. The country is being plunged back into level 4 lockdown. That'll happen from midnight tonight, after a case of COVID-19 was discovered in the community. A 58-year-old man from Devonport in Auckland has tested positive for the virus. He also visited Coromandel town whilst infectious. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says they're treating it as the highly transmissible Delta variant, which requires an immediate response.
Delta has been called a game changer, and it is. It means we need to again go hard and early to stop the spread. We have seen what can happen elsewhere if we fail to get on top of it. We only get one chance. That's why Cabinet has met this afternoon and made the decision that New Zealand will move to alert level 4 from 11:59 p.m. tonight. Level 4 will be for an initial period of 3 days, except for Auckland and the Coromandel Peninsula, who we anticipate will likely be at level 4 for 7 days, due to them being most closely linked to our current case.
The Prime Minister reminded people what the level 4 rules are.
The underlying principle for level 4 is reduce down contact between people to a bare minimum, essential contact only. That means the simplest thing New Zealanders can do to stop the spread of the virus is to stay at home. Delta spreads more easily via the air, so physical distancing is even more important. The reasons for leaving your home under alert level 4 include physical exercise in your neighbourhood, visiting the supermarket, dairy or pharmacy, necessary medical care, or getting a test. And if you undertake these activities, please wear a mask when you leave the house. The bubble is back. The people in your bubble should be the people in your immediate household or those dependent on you. Once you go into a bubble, you must stay in it and others cannot join. If you are completely isolated or you live alone, remember you can join a bubble with one other person that you have contact with. It needs to be just you and that person though.
Now, the lockdown will also affect the vaccine rollout.
We will be suspending vaccinations for 48 hours while we ensure that vaccinations are unable to take place in a safe environment, both for our vaccinators and those who may be visiting. We have currently 40% of our eligible population vaccinated with at least one dose. We want that to continue safely, and when we can, we will.
Jacinda Ardern also confirmed that financial support will be made available to businesses. Now, there are 23 locations of interest at the moment. That could change. We've got a few of them for you, so just bear with me and I'll go through part of the list. Star and Garter Hotel in the Coromandel, Umu Cafe Coromandel, BP Gas Station Coromandel, and that is the one on Tiki Road, Driving Creek Railway Tours Coromandel, Jack's Cafe and Bar, Hereford in a Pickle Coromandel, Taris Beads in the Coromandel also, Richardson's Real Estate, Coromandel, and there were other visits also to Umu Cafe and the Star Ngata Hotel in the Coromandel. Now, all of these are up on the Ministry of Health website under the heading Current Locations of Interest in Auckland. Alongside each of the locations is the exact times which you need to check if you were there. Next to that is the instructions that you must follow. And the Director General of Health reiterated during his press conference, you're required to follow those instructions by law. Professor Michael Baker is an epidemiologist from the University of Otago and joins me now. Kia ora, Michael.
Kia ora.
So if you were calling the shots, would you have done anything differently from what we've just heard?
No, look, I think this is exactly the right response. And I think the Prime Minister and Director General really outlined the rationale extremely clearly for why we're taking this very vigorous response. We only have to look at New South Wales to see what the alternative is. I mean, we could pause and collect more information and gradually increase our response, but we might be then seeing the kind of slow, extended outbreak that they're seeing in New South Wales. I think the lesson, all our experience in New Zealand, and the lessons from overseas is this very rapid, vigorous response is the way to deal with this virus.
Can you talk us through, normally we rely heavily on contact tracing, right? Can we not keep up with Delta and contact tracing? What makes this different?
Yeah, look, the evidence is we can't keep up with this virus with contact tracing alone. Now, it worked very well last year with the original variant. Even the Alpha variant was manageable with contact tracing, but not the Delta variant. And partly because you have a much bigger viral load, and that means there's two effects. One is you are much more infectious, and so you, instead of typically infecting 2 or 3 people, you infect 5 or 6 others. So the exponential curve is much steeper. But the other problem is that you're infectious about a day earlier. So it means that contact tracing, even if it's done very well, is you're still chasing the virus and not getting ahead of it. So contact tracing is still vital, and we're seeing the value of it here with this case to define the risks for family members and workplace members and so on. And that will help in working out how infectious this particular case was. So that's obviously still vital. But the difficulty here is, as has been said over and over again, is we don't know where this case came from. That means there must be other undetected cases in the community and lines of transmission we can't see. So the only way to get on top of it is to get all those people to effectively stay at home and home quarantine, and that's why we're having the lockdown.
Michael, we're just losing you a little bit there with the phone, so I might just get you to adjust the handpiece a little bit because we want to hear what you're saying. So you believe, because there's no link that they can pick right now with MIQ or the border, that it's almost inevitable that there will be other cases already in the community?
There has to be other cases because this person must have got infected from somewhere. And that's the reason why there's so much concern with this person. If there was a clear link to the border, contact tracing could have defined all of those cases in context, and it would be much more manageable.
So we know that he was symptomatic from Saturday and therefore likely infectious from around the 12th. So we're talking about 5 days here. And, I mean, what potentially are the consequences of that?
Yes, well, that depends really on 2 main things. One is how many contacts did he have, and also how infectious he was during that period. And there's a lot of variability. I mean, some people have quite a strong immune response. They don't have such a big viral load. They're not firing out as many viral particles. And this is quite a bit of individual variation. But the other big factor is some people have huge social networks, and they meet people in indoor environments like bars or nightclubs. So I think the fact that he's in an older age group means that he probably wasn't. He may not have been doing all those things. So these are things that tip the balance in favour of control rather than the sort of super spreading episodes, which is the other extreme.
Michael, what do you make of the decision to suspend the vaccination program for, I think it's 48 hours while they get their heads around this? Is that the right move?
Well, I think so, because really it's another situation where people will congregate and in some vaccination centres. I mean, it's just trying to minimise the level of movement that people have and contact over the next few days, while the extent of this outbreak is defined. So I think it's just part of that, and it is obviously it's not an absolutely essential activity at the moment.
Thank you for joining us. That is Professor Michael Baker, who's an epidemiologist from the University of Otago. Now, there are 23 locations of interest so far, and 13 of them are in the Coromandel town, where the couple visited on the weekend. The Coromandel Mayor is Sandra Gowdy, and she joins me now. I imagine this has come as a bit of a shock, has it?
Well, it has, because I'm in the middle of nowhere off of the Port Jackson Road, and I only heard it by chance because we turned on the radio. And then I had to walk up the hill to be able to use my phone.
So you didn't get a heads up as the mayor of the district?
Well, no one could ring me because I was off grid. I'm off grid. And so I had to walk up the phone once I heard the radio. I realised that, hello, we're in trouble here, and I need to get back up and be here. And so we'll probably head back now.
Yeah, so these places that they've identified, can you tell us a bit about them? Are they busy spots? This is the Star and Garter Hotel, Umu Cafe, Driving Creek Railway Tours. Give us a bit of an idea of, the volume of people you might expect to have gone through some of these places.
Well, Driving Creek Railway is hugely popular, and so there's always visitors going and having that experience, and it's one of the places I recommend. Umu Cafe is absolutely a brilliant little cafe, and delicious food and great staff. So it's one of the most popular places in Coromandel Town as an eatery. Star and Garter is another one, and of course, what a great place to go and watch the rugby. So really, I mean, I love Coromandel Town, and I don't blame anybody for wanting to take some time out and spend some time there. And we're still getting plenty of visitors coming through. So for something like this to happen, that's the way it is.
So there's potentially going to be hundreds of people who have to isolate and get tested as a consequence of coming in contact with this case.
Well, I don't know. I would think that there will certainly be a reasonable number. Yeah. I mean, Coromandel Town is always reasonably busy on a weekend. And, of course, with the rugby, it would have been busy with the rugby as well.
Obviously, it's been hard times for businesses with a lack of international tourists, and now your district, is part of a 7-day level 4 lockdown. What kind of effect is that going to have?
Not good. So, we're not happy about it. I mean, who is? No one's going to be particularly happy about a lockdown. But here's the thing: we need to do in any emergency. It's the same scenario. You just got to hunker down and do what you need to do to get through it. And we're good at that on the Coromandel, and so we will. We'll hunker down. We'll do what we need to do, and we'll get through it.
How good are people generally with scanning in your observations?
I would say visitors are probably more conscientious than locals. And you got to remember, though, that when you're shopping as a local, you can often tell through your credit card purchases or your FPOF purchases where you've been. So that's another way of contact tracing if you haven't been doing the scanning. So, I mean, have you scanned in anywhere today? No, I'm off grid. I haven't been anywhere today.
Right. But would you normally scan in?
No, it's very hit and miss for me.
So will this encourage you to pick up your game in terms of scanning then?
Probably not.
Why is that?
Because I'm quite a believer in my credit card tracking everywhere I've been.
But as the mayor of the district, Sandra, do you think it would be good to set an example and maybe step up a bit of scanning now that you're in a level 4 lockdown and there's a case in the community?
Well, that does change things to some extent. I don't know. It's not a habit that I've got into. And so I'm just being honest with you here. I'm not trying to prevaricate. I'm not trying to fudge it. I'm just being absolutely honest about what I do and what I believe that happens within the community.
Appreciate your time, Sandra. That's Sandra Gardy, who is the Mayor of the Coromandel District. Just to recap, 58-year-old man from Devonport has tested positive for COVID in the community. We're not sure what strain it is. Genome sequencing is taking place overnight, should be available very early tomorrow morning. At the moment, the government is treating it as if it is Delta, which has led to 11:59 tonight. We move into level 4 lockdown. That is the whole country, Auckland and Coromandel for 7 days. Rest of the country for 3 to start off with. No links to the border that they can find or MIQ, so they're going to try and find that source.
Ahi Mari e RNZ News at 7, ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. The entire country will go into an alert level 4 lockdown at midnight tonight. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has just made the announcement following the discovery of a community case of COVID-19 in Auckland. The snap lockdown will last 3 days for the entire country, while Auckland and the Coromandel will stay in alert level 4 for a total of 7 days. Ms Ardern says pending test results, the government is operating on the assumption the case is the highly transmissible Delta variant.
We have made decisions on the basis that it is better to start high and go down levels rather than start too low, not contain the virus and see it move quickly. We've seen the dire consequences of taking too long to act in other countries, not least our neighbours.
Jacinda Ardern says the vaccination program will be suspended for 48 hours until health officials ensure vaccines can be delivered safely. The community case of COVID-19 is a 58-year-old man from Devonport on Auckland's North Shore. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says the case was identified when the man went to his GP with symptoms to get a test.